A Short and Easy Method of Prayer by Madame Guyon. The French editor's remarks on the life of Madame Guyon. If to any the state of long-continued probation or testing she underwent seems strange, it is for want of duly observing what the writer to the Hebrews says of Jesus Christ himself. In bringing many sons to glory, it was fitting that God, for whom and through whom everything exists, should make the author of their salvation perfect through suffering. Hebrews 2:10. The Apostle Paul also assures us that those souls that God foreknew, he also predestined to be conformed to the likeness of his Son. This privation, by which she was purified and prepared for service, ought therefore not to astonish such readers as have never heard of anything like it. It was the same in substance which was experienced by the great patriarchs, Job and David, and by many other enlightened souls, the memory of whose sanctity is held in honour to this day. It is a state consummated by the sacrifice of eternal salvation, or a consent to continue forever, if God pleases so to direct it, and for his glory, in this same state of rigorous privation which so many saints have undergone, and wherein they would rather choose hell itself than the least sin, a state which is at last followed with that of the purest union with God, and according as it pleases him, with gifts and graces of very high degrees. Here will be seen examples of several sorts, and of some as sublime as any that are to be met with anywhere. As there are in it many things which pass the natural comprehension of the human mind, it will be well, in reading them, to remember that saying of St. Paul, "No one knows the thoughts of God except the Spirit of God." 1 Corinthians 2:11. And again, "The spiritual man makes judgments about all things, but he himself is not subject to any man's judgment." 1 Corinthians 2:15. This advice of the Apostle ought to make us very cautious about condemning the ingenuity with which this purified soul has described without disguise a part of the persecutions which have been stirred up against her by all sorts of persons. However, God permitted her to pass over in silence the most considerable part, which regards her last persecutions and her imprisonment. As to what appertains to her first probations in her family, of which she lays open the particulars, not very favourable of the person she speaks of, she has made use of so many precautions to prevent anyone's passing a judgment to their disadvantage, that assuredly none of those in any way involved can have any reason of discontent arising from such instances of mortification and patience here given, as may serve to the edification of souls and to the glory of God. Here is not any such action exposed as to fix a blemish on them, such as God has permitted the sacred writers to fix on the families of Jacob, David, and several other saints who were honoured none the less on that account. She has declared over and over that they had at heart the fear of God, a sincere piety, and a good share of virtue and charity, that their manner of acting towards her was a dispensation of God to purify her, to which end he shut their eyes, that they might fall into the mistakes necessary to produce the effect he designed by it, and that, after that use had been made of it, all returned from their prejudices, humbled themselves before her, acknowledged the solidity of her virtue, and even composed eulogies about her. A reader of any discernment ought not, in these occurrences, to dwell on the thoughts of the person who commits the faults, and look on himself as above such weaknesses. He ought rather to fear, if God placed him in such probation and left him to himself, that he would do 100 times worse, and perhaps never recover from it. It is only for the person who receives such treatments to look at them with meekness, silence, patience, suppression of the movements of nature, benignity, beneficence to every neighbour, thanksgiving to God in order to be edified and built up thereby, and to pray to God for grace to enable him to imitate Christ in the like trials. For this excellent purpose has God permitted these things to be set before our eyes. For if all acted this way, in all the occurrences of private life and with all those they converse with, the same things which generally prove subjects and sources of dissensions and debates, of hostility and hatred, of wars and every sort of evils temporal, and often eternal, would be changed into means of improvement and goodness, into spiritual succours, into schools to make us become saints, and like angels in purity, innocence, goodness, and charity. They would render us true disciples and imitators of Jesus Christ. And indeed, without this, no man is his but in imagination, nor a Christian but in name. Formerly, to purify the Christians, God made use of the hatred and persecutions of the idolatrous pagans, who by their torments and their fires purified them like gold in the furnace. Now, since there are no more pagans for that purpose, it pleases God, in order to purify souls, to make use of the daily contact, the moods and vexations of those one lives with, relations, friends, acquaintance, and neighbours. If we received their manner of behaving to us as Christians, and according to the intention of God, it would render us true saints and procure us a peace unalterable and eternal, as appears in this sanctified soul, which gives us to see here that she derived those good effects by this way, which is without doubt a part of the daily cross which Jesus Christ says we must bear if we will come after him and accompany him both in this world and the other.